What's going on YouTube? This is Rybo back at the bench, and today I've got another head-to-head. So it's been a while since I've done a head-to-head, but here is another knife head-to-head. This time this is a cold steel showdown. Now this head-to-head doesn't maybe make total sense. I mean, what would really make sense here obviously is the AD-10 against the AD-15. And while I have owned both of these knives, I currently don't have an AD-15 and I won't have an AD-10 for long. Because this one is not going to stay around. But I wanted to go ahead and film the head-to-head anyway between these two knives. And that is because I'm keeping one of these and I'm not keeping one of these. And there's a reason why. And not everybody's like me, and the knives aren't maybe super comparable, but they are comparable in at least two ways. That is, they're really freaking big knives and they're both made by cold steel. So I thought, why not film a head-to-head for someone who may be looking at, these two knives. So anyway, I'm gonna film it. You don't have to watch it, but here we go. All right, so as a refresher, here are the categories for my head-to-heads. So pocket clips, scales, overall size, that's height, weight, whatever. Ergonomics, action, detent. And I didn't put a space there. I messed that up. Blade, steel, lock system, and the intangibles category. And I don't have any fancy, nice looking things to put here on either side like I used to do with stickers, but I am in the workshop. And so what I did grab was a bucket of screws. And so those will be our little scorekeepers. All right, so let's go ahead and start out the head-to-head with looking at the horrific, terrible, awful, no good, very bad pocket clips from Cold Steel. They're really bad. I hate the Cold Steel pocket clips. It's probably my least favorite thing about the entire brand. I don't understand them. I don't get it at all. So a couple things when you look at these. One, they're in similar style. Obviously you can see the AD-10 one kind of matches the vibe of the knife and that it's much chunkier, but they're both kind of the same overall style in terms of the rough length of the clip, like the clip to blade or clip to handle ratio, and then the overall design, which is pretty basic. Not a huge lip on these. You've got about the same on this one, maybe even a little bit smaller. The difference being this, you have a much flatter handle, so it's maybe a little bit easier to get in there, but pretty slim ramp there. But overall profile is about the same. This one much wider, and this one has that curve going on. You do get an extra pocket clip with the code 4 because it does have that curve. So if you want to put it over here, obviously that wouldn't work. So you do get a different pocket clip to go on the other side, but same style there. So how do I make a choice of which pocket clip is the best between these two very bad pocket clips? Let me get my screw out here to denote the winner. Go ahead and drop some of these on the table. If I had to pick between these, I'd pick a different knife, but I guess if I have to pick one, I'm gonna say the pocket clip win goes to the code 4. Honestly, I don't really know why, besides the fact that it limits the ugliness to some degree. It's smaller, and so I've noticed a little bit less kind of spring retention when I try to get it in or out of the pocket. So it's not quite as strong and resistant to that. Besides that, the fact that this is a flat handle here does help a little bit. It's a little bit smoother than the grip here, so it is a little bit easier to get in and out. But honestly, not a great start. All right, the scales. So here's our first major difference. So the code 4 has these very slick, I believe, aluminum scales, nice green color. If you watch the channel or look at the site, you know that I'm a green fan, but I like the color here. So very slick, but really nice looking. This has what I believe is G10, I think. G10 Nice and grippy, not like too textured, you know, still somewhat slick, but you do get a little bit of texture there. Honestly, I would give the aesthetics to this, but practically, since I'm more of a practical person, I will give the win to the AD-10 here for a number of reasons, and this will come up in just a little bit, but you have more shaping on those handles, definitely, you know, more, well, we'll talk about ergos in a second, but more contouring here, but also just a lot more textured. You know, live in the South. I've talked about like my hands constantly sweat, so I look for something that's got some nice grip to it. And you know, while this I wouldn't say is overly textured and could probably use to be a little bit more textured, I do prefer this in the hand, although I really like the way that this looks and feels, but it can be kind of slick. So I'll give the win to the AD-10 there. All right, overall size. I don't have scales, but you can kind of look at these knives and probably figure out what's going on here. So the AD-10 is roughly roughly twice the size or the thickness of the Code 4. The Code 4's kind of calling card is that it's super thin. You look at the back lock there, that chunk of steel, that's about the size of both of the handles put together. Whereas if you look at the Code 4, you have those liners there, and you have that thicker G10 on each side, thick liners, and then that thick lock bar there. Much beefier knife, and you know, there's a reason for that. But when it comes to everyday carry, this was really laughable in the pocket, while the Code 4 was really surprising. Oh, I can't do that. That's not the same size. While this was actually fairly practical in the pocket and was actually pretty surprising when I started carrying the Code 4. While it is a pretty long knife and it does take up a lot of pocket space, it's very lightweight because of those thin handles, the fact that I believe it's aluminum. And so for a large knife, it actually carries fairly well. And so for me personally, I'm willing to give up that beefiness to get a better grip on the knife, better handle, in exchange for the lightness and carryability of the Code 4. So for me, overall size, the Code 4 definitely wins. Now, ergos. This is probably, as a brand, Cold Steel's strongest point, from my perspective at least. A lot of people would probably disagree with that, but from my standpoint, they really do ergonomics really well. And a lot of times that comes at the expense of things like size or weight. You look at something like the AD-10, and the AD-15 was the same way, but I mean, this is basically like a fixed blade. And this feels really good in hand. You got a ton of space to grab that knife. And while I'm not always a fan of like contouring the handles and putting deep choils and stuff like that, when it works, it really works. And I think it really works on both of these knives. The difference though would be the fact that this one is so thin. And so you do start to feel those edges there. You do wrap around a little bit more. Honestly, the ergos on this knife for what it is are really incredible. Because it's such a light knife, because it's so thin, the ergonomics are really fantastic. And so I'm tempted to kind of call this a draw, but you get the beefiness and the roundness of that handle, and it just really fills up the grip much better. And so it's somewhat of an unfair comparison just because these are two just totally different knives in a lot of ways, but I'll call the winner the AD-10 in that respect. All right, action detent. This is gonna be probably a tie. Let me just do this one more time. Nope, it's not. I thought it was, but I was wrong. They're both really good. It comes down to it's really minute, the difference, but as I'm sitting here opening them, I forgot that there is a pretty big difference. Not big difference, it's a pretty small difference, but when you're doing them side by side, you can definitely tell. The AD-10 is a lot smoother. I don't know if that's just the beefiness of the handle material and those liners in there, but the action on this opening, it just rolls out a lot smoother. The Code 4 is surprisingly smooth, but you can definitely feel it's just not quite as, I don't know, robust maybe as the AD-10. So I'll give that to AD-10. That surprised me. I'd kind of forgotten how smooth that AD-10 open was. All right, next up is the blade. And this one, really all I can do is compare the two that are sitting in front of me. The Code 4, obviously, you can get in a couple different blade profiles. I think they do a Tanto. They also do, I forget. This is the clip point. I really like the clip point. I think it's really sweet. This is a great blade as well. This is probably my favorite thing about the AD-10 is the blade. And maybe this is not fair, but I gotta give the advantage to the Code 4. I mean, I basically got the knife, bought it from a friend because I love that clip point blade style so much. And I think practically, it really does give you something visually. I think it definitely gives you something that practically too. You have that real thin point. You still have a fairly beefy stock there. Really, really nice hollow grind here. And a lot of that you get on this knife as well. But this one just has that beef factor a little bit, which matches the knife. But I think for everyday practical use, both of these would be really fantastic. But to me, I would go with the clip point here. Okay. So we're all tied up heading into the final 3 categories. So steel, another one that's a little bit difficult to do because I just have to go based on the knives that I have sitting in front of me. So my version of the Code 4 is in CTS XHP, although you can get this in a couple different steel versions. This is an older one, and then this is the S35VN. Now, it's no secret that I am a big fan of XHP, and I have been a little bit down on S35. However, and I'm kind of surprising myself as we go, because I really expected this head-to-head to go one way, and it's not really. But however, I am going to give the advantage to the S35, and that is because over the years, as much as I love XHP, and I still love it, and I will keep this knife, I have had rust issues, if I'm not super careful. And so that is one of the downsides. I do get razor sharp edges from XHP. I do still really like it. But that has been something that has been increasingly frustrating about it, that I have to kind of worry about checking it, keeping things oiled down and clean and all of that. And honestly, it has limited to some degree the frequency with which I carry the knife. Sorry, struggling over words. But as much as I have not been super down on S35, but it doesn't hold the edge quite as long as I'd wish. I don't have those concerns with S35, and I haven't run into anything like that. So just, practically, I think S35 probably would be the preferred steel for some people, but again, steel is one of those like super subjective things. All right, lock system. I'm gonna call this one a dead tie. So this is the cold steel, what's it called? The triad lock, I think. Basically back lock with that extra pin to be super rigid. Both of these have the same issue that I've noted with many cold steels. I think maybe the AD-10 to a lesser degree, slightly lesser degree, doesn't have that catch quite as much, but you still have to mash that thing down pretty far until it disengages. And that's always been my hang up with the triad lock, although I think it's a fantastic lock, and you can see where that fits over the pin there and right there. But I'm gonna call these a dead tie because it's the same lock. All right, so it comes down to intangibles, and right now the AD-10 has a lead. This one's easy for me. The intangibles definitely goes to the Code 4. There's something about the fact that it's a big, beefy, cold steel knife, but yet it is super, super thin and carries really, really well. It's fairly lightweight. I fell in love with the Code 4 pretty much as soon as I got it. It's one of those knives that you don't maybe necessarily get until you get it in hand, and then it's like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Some things I would change, like this right here. I like the look of this and the feel of this. This is a little bit wonky to me. And there are some things here and there, but overall, like the pocket clip. But overall, it's a fantastic knife. Now the AD-10, you know, really surprised me in the head-to-head today. I did not expect that it would come in as a dead tie, in my rankings at least. But I think that's a good testament to the fact that, like, this is super subjective. Like, on paper, these knives are both really, really good, but I just happen to really like one and not like the other one so much because it's just not my type of use. But I think this proves out, like, they're both really, really good knives. They're actually fairly on par with each other. You have give and takes with each one. For me, if I had to pick one, it would definitely be the Code 4, but as I stand here looking at it, it's a dead tie on paper with the rankings that I've used for years. So what does that tell you after watching this for 15 minutes? Probably not much. We ended with no clear winner and a lot of me talking. But that's why you came here probably. So hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you next time.